down this rabbit hole. Let's see.
Hey, good evening and welcome back to Mr. Red. That doesn't sound right. That doesn't sound right, does it? Was he not a horse?
He was a talking bloody horse.
Thanks, John. Close enough.
One of the many nicknames I've had to endure in the course of my life.
Oh.
Bloody horse. Although, fortunately, these days, there's hardly anyone alive that still remembers the bloody thing anyway. So
I'm still here, mate. Still kicking.
Oh, dear.
Anyway, good evening, one and all. We are going to dive into the history of the KGB and a certain, shall we say, world leader who used to be an officer within that august organization. I don't think that's quite the right term I should be using.
Well, it kind of is. I mean, although the thing is that particularly our generation, our upbringing was very much coloured by the notion of the KGB being the bad guys, and they were doing all of the bad things, and we were the good guys, and we wouldn't dream of doing bad things. And as you get older and wiser, you realise that our side was just as bad.
Oh yeah.
I mean, maybe not so much in the days of the Checker, but certainly during the Cold War. I mean, the amount of evil stuff that the CIA got up to.
Well, yeah, but even then, I think the Stasi took the biscuit. I think they took the biscuit. So anyway,
yeah.
Let me introduce the people in the chat room to anyone who is lurking about, because we're very inclusive here. We will speak to you. Usually an insult, but you know, an insult from a Scotsman is as good as a compliment, is it not? Espresso Mechanic TV, Dave Barnes, Shalini, Notorious, Julie C, Dreadeye, good evening, Ray, Cheese Cooked, perfect timing, says Ray. Emma Watt says hello, and that's it in the landscape stream. What have we got in the other stream? Nobody's talking in the... Oh, yeah, we do. McNell's TV. Good evening, McNell's TV. You are alone and speaking to us on the vertical stream, but I'll be keeping an eye on it. If you want to join the big boys over in the landscape, feel free. Oh, and get the chair into a height that will stay there. Right. Let's carry on, Ed. Carry on. Paul Armstrong, good. He's a Vlad fan. Oh, he's a Vlad fan. Vlad. I was going to make it Vlad the Terrible on the on the what do you call it, thumbnail, but I thought, nah, that's too much. We'll be speaking about Vlad tomorrow as well, because there's loads to cover tomorrow, Ed.
Tomorrow is just going to be another super packed mega show.
Yeah.
I've been collecting bookmarks for it, so there's just this. I mean, and to be honest, between now and when the show starts tomorrow, there's probably going to be a whole load of other stuff that happens, so loads of bookmarks will probably end up going out the window to be replaced with new, more up-to-date ones.
Possibly. Hatchy, good to see you as well, mate. Right, okay. McNell's TV sending love hearts and icons, I think. That's cool. Right. Let's crack on. Here we go. I'm never going to be able to pronounce this. Can you do it? Go for it, man.
Komitet Gosudanostovelny Bezos Paznosti, commonly known as KGB. Let's just call it the KGB, shall we? I think it simply means the Committee for State Security.
Yeah, well, that's a kind of Soviet type name, isn't it? And that's probably quite accurate, because it was kind of Soviet Union it wasn't kind of, it was the Soviet Union that it evolved from the Checker. And I'd
also just like to point out to any Russians who might be listening that I really do apologize for absolutely mangling the pronunciation of it. I in no way intended any offense.
You've moved again.
What?
You've moved again. You moved into center screen. Stop moving into center screen. Stay slightly to one side. Or I'll tell you what, Just stay exactly where. Stay exactly where. Go back. Sit exactly center screen, and I'll fix it while you're talking.
I'm a fucking fidget ass.
Yes, you are.
I can't
You're
help it.
pain in the
I
butt.
move. I know. I can't help it. This is why I wanted to just be an avatar.
You're not getting to be an avatar. People want to see your lovely smiling face. Right. So
I want to look at me for 2 hours.
So the KGB though is one of the most feared and renowned in security services, I would say, and yet it's probably got one of the shortest histories of them all.
Mm.
You know, I mean,
Yeah.
from what 54, from it sprang into being under the Soviet Union in 54, and it was dissolved in 91 in the breakup of the Soviet Union. And before that, there was the Cheka, and that was
1917.
Fearsome beast.
Yeah, that was the All-Russian Extraordinary Commission to Combat Counter-Revolution and Sabotage, which somehow in Russian is Cheka, which is the acronym. And that was led by Felix Dzerzhinsky, also known as Iron Felix to his friends, and not friends.
An approachable guy then.
Yeah, but they were basically tasked with identifying enemies of the revolution through whatever means necessary. And by whatever means necessary, it usually meant being taken around the back of the chemical sheds and shot in the back of the head if you were lucky, and taken to the, well, what was the Cheka headquarters? I think that the same
Lubyanka.
Yeah, basically.
Lubyanka prison, was it?
Yeah, but there was also quite a famous, the building that the KGB was based out of.
Was that not Lubyanka? No?
I don't think so. I'm not sure off the top of my head. I can't remember the name of it.
I thought the KGB was based out of the Lubyanka, but I may be wrong. Maybe next time you just will be able to tell us.
Look it up.
Yeah, you could, but right. Where are we? So operating. Sorry,
no, go on. No, you go on.
So operating as the sword and shield of the Communist Party, the KGB protected Soviet interests abroad while ruthlessly suppressing dissidents at home, creating a legacy that continues to influence Russian security structures and global intelligence practices to this day. Through decades of Cold War operations, political surveillance, and technological espionage, the KGB shaped not only Soviet history, but international relations throughout the latter half of the 20th century. Good old KGB. Yeah,
I mean, they're hugely influential. And I think the early form, the Cheka, and to some extent the KGB as well. I mean, you have to remember that whereas the United States has the CIA, which does external, and the FBI that does internal, technically speaking, and Britain has the same with MI5 and MI6. The KGB essentially did it all. They did external, they did border security, and they did internal stuff as well. So all of the old spy stories, I mean, Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, all of the John le Carre books. I mean, even in James Bond, the Smersh, which was
Smersh.
I mean, they were essentially modeled on
of course
on this organization as well. And they did have obviously they had the brutal side where they pick people up and do nasty things to them. But they were also responsible for counterintelligence and actually keeping the Russian state ideologically pure, as it were.
So yes, the KGB was based out of the Lubyanka building.
Okay.
In Lubyanka Square. And the FSB still operates partly from that building. Indeed, there you go. Right.
Because the KGB lasted until 1991.
Yeah. And there's I suppose there's a kind of guy that used to work in the KGB that everybody knows these days. And we'll touch on him later on, won't we?
Yeah, well, he's kind of
Kind of in
famous.
the news a lot, yeah.
Yeah, like a lot.
Yeah.
And also, but the thing is that when you actually look at his history, I think that the hysteria, the Putin derangement syndrome that we've been dealing with for at least 10 years, it doesn't strike me as being an accurate reflection of the man himself. I mean, when you see how he is as a leader, and okay, there's no denying that he was in the KGB. There's no denying that it influenced him. I mean, if you listen to some of the that his reason for wanting, because he first applied to the KGB when he was 15, and they told him to bugger off and go and get a university degree first.
Get educated. Yeah.
Yeah. So he did a law degree, and then he was approached by a recruiter. But his reason for when he was 15 for wanting to join the KGB is because he realized that one spy could influence thousands of lives. The kind of influence that you have in that sort of position is quite monumental. But we'll come back to Vladimir Vladimirovich in a little while.
Okay, so the evolution of the KGB. I don't really want to go into the Cheka in too much detail, do you?
No, we're here to do the KGB. We literally we could suck up loads of time talking about the Cheka. And I mean all of the and to be honest, they got up to a lot of dark stuff, and the purpose of the Cheka was more about kind of making sure that the communist revolution was successful by taking out anybody that disagreed with them.
Yeah,
I think so. Yeah,
I think World War II, when World War II came about, the NKVD kind of got spawned. Well, it was around before that, but World War II really brought all the intelligence services into their own, because they were all spying on each other, both allies and foes. You know, they weren't averse to spying on their allies as well. So, and the NKVD, the NKVD were pretty much the KGB. They just kind of morphed into it, rather than a wholly brand new organization.
Well, the NKVD, I mean, they were responsible for what's known as the Great Purge or the Great Terror, which happened in the 1930s. And that was...
Just as an aside, Ed, why would anyone want to start fighting a country, right, that has parts of its history known as the Great Purge and the Great Terror? Really? Come on, people.
Well, I mean, even before you get to that point, if you look at the state of the German and the French armies going into Russia, and then you look at the state of the same German and French armies coming out of Russia, and this has happened twice, and it's completely standard historical knowledge. Why the hell would you not just want to do everything you could to make friends with this country they'll just bleed you. It's what they're doing in Ukraine. They've got all the land, they've got loads of people, they just do attritional war, and you will die.
I know. Actually,
Otto von Bismarck, one of his quotes is, "The secret to politics is to make a good treaty with Russia."
Yeah. What was one of the other? Oh, the secret of diplomacy is being able to say yes and no. Hatchie, that is not an image that's going to leave me in a hurry. He says he's in his underpants playing Bodie and Doyle under the covers with his dogs.
Okay, that is way too much information, and yeah, just we don't need to know what you're doing or what sort of state of dress or undress you're in, or what you're doing with your dogs under the covers, which is all a bit worrying, but let's not go there.
Yeah, let's, right. The formal establishment of the KGB in 1954 represented a significant milestone in the evolution of Soviet security services. reflecting both continuity with previous organizations, NKVD, and adaptation to new political realities following Stalin's death. The years after Stalin's death in 1953 witnessed significant changes in Soviet security structures as Nikita Khrushchev consolidated powers and initiated limited reform.
And then we get on to Beria.
Yeah, Beria.
And he merged. Well, Beria is an interesting character because he had a massive impact.
Is he a Georgian?
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, anyway, carry on.
He had a huge amount of power because he'd merged the Ministry of State Security back into the Ministry of Internal Affairs. And that gave him a huge amount of power, which in March of 1953 he attempted to use to use his control over the security forces to seize power, as in power of the country. But he was arrested in June 1953.
An attempted coup, really.
Yeah. No, it was absolutely an attempted coup. But he was arrested in June 1953 by military officers loyal to Khrushchev and other Politburo members, and subsequently executed, probably taken around the back of the chemical sheds and shot in the back of the head, most likely.
Stop making shit up.
I don't know. He was subsequently executed. I thought that was how they did things back in those days.
Well, I don't know if they took people behind the chemical sheds. I don't even know what the chemical sheds are. What the hell?
It's from V for Vendetta.
The chemical sheds. I will take you behind the chemical sheds and I will put something in your head quite quickly.
Anyway, so Beria's downfall led to a major restructuring of Soviet security, and the whole point was to make it impossible for one person to wield that much power again. Because the KGB was essentially intended as the shield of the Communist Party.
Yeah.
And so it was very much directed in that way, that they sort of kept it very much by committee, and the Politburo had control over it, and they didn't allow a situation where one person could go in and take over and then use that power to further his own power.
Yeah, they didn't want a kind of a repeat of the Beria situation.
Mm-hmm.
So and to do that, they developed a complex organizational structure. They did indeed. Designed to address the full spectrum of security and intelligence concerns facing the Soviet state, both internal and external. As Union Republic State Committee, the KGB controlled corresponding committees in each of the 14 non-Russian Soviet republics. We're looking at you, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Ukraine. You know who you are.
Georgia,
yeah.
Moldova. Was Moldova a former
Belarus,
Soviet republic?
Poland.
Maybe not.
Yeah. Moldova. Romania,
wasn't it Khrushchev that essentially he just signed a thing and transferred Crimea over to Ukraine because he was Ukrainian? And
yeah, I think so.
I don't know. They've got a bit of a bug up their butts about Crimea.
It was a kind of stupid thing to do as well, because Crimea, I mean, let's face it, Crimea, the site of the famous charge off the Light Brigade, when some lunatic English, was he a colonel or a captain? He wasn't even a general, was he?
No, I think he was a colonel.
Yeah,
because I don't think a captain wouldn't have been able to. Well, no, because I think colonels are in charge of brigades, aren't they?
Yeah, but this lunatic took the Light Brigade, right, against heavy troops.
Yeah, they got slaughtered.
He did. He got his ass well and truly kicked. And, and yet we still put it down as victory, do we? I mean, you remember this in school, and you were thinking, yeah, charge of the Light Brigade, that's brilliant. And you were thinking, and nobody ever mentioned the fact that we lost.
like really badly. But
Yeah.
it's also this weird obsession that particularly the British establishment has had against Russia. And I mean, it predates, I think it goes back from all of the research that I've done, it kind of goes back to what they call the Great Game, which was never really much of a game, but it was this idea, particularly when the British had India, that they were constantly worried that the Russians were going to try and take India away from them. And when
I
you
wish
actually
they had. I wish they had.
well, the thing is that when you actually look back through history, the Russians never had. They were never going to do anything of the sort.
I know. Well, it's like just now, isn't it? You know, Europe's running about in a flap saying, you know, we're going to be invaded by Russia any minute, and Russia's not going to do anything. Well, Russia doesn't have the capability of invading Europe. It could flatten Europe, but it can't invade it, right? It doesn't have the capability, and it doesn't have the will or the want to rule over people that hate it.
They've got no reason to. I mean,
exactly.
They have all the resources they need. They have all the people they need. They've got 11 time zones. I mean, they can even. I mean, they've got time zones coming out of their bumholes, and large sections of Russia are underpopulated. They don't need a bunch of weirdo purple head LGBTQ people that hate them.
Yeah.
Why? I mean, why would they do that? The Russians, they want to do business. I mean, at one point, Putin was talking about Russia initially. There was a suggestion that the Russians join NATO and that Russia maybe joins the EU. This is what people don't realize, is that Putin was very much wanting to take Russia westwards.
Yeah.
And we forced him to go eastwards.
We pushed him into China's arms, and that's exactly what's happened. So,
and that was what Kissinger was warned about.
So
let's
move back to the KGB.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Right. The operational capabilities of the KGB were organised into approximately 20 directorates, each responsible for specific aspects of state security. The first chief directorate handled all foreign operations and intelligence gathering activities. So that's the same as the CIA and the same as SIX. And working through subgroups organised by both function and geographical regions. The second chief directorate focused on counterintelligence and internal political control, MI5. While the third chief directorate conducted military counterintelligence and surveillance of the armed forces. Now, we probably do that, but it's probably done by what? GCHQ and military intelligence.
GCHQ is signals.
Yeah, and we do have intelligence. We do have intelligence operatives that aren't directly attached to MI5 within each of the services. Each branch has its own intelligence service, or it used to. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it still does. It certainly did used to, because I have personal experience of that. Not me personally, but I have personal experience.
I'm sure they do. I mean, it would be daft not to, because they need to know what's going on, essentially.
Yeah. Right. And the fifth chief directorate, established in the late 60s, was specifically tasked with monitoring dissidents, religious activists, and intellectuals. Because remember, Soviets didn't like religion, did they? Although they kind of still, they didn't stamp on it as hard as they could have, I suppose. Because the people still did it under not undercover, but, under the radar, so to speak.
Well, this is the problem with communists, is that you have to worship them, as we're seeing with our own particular brand of communists.
Yes, indeed.
And if you don't turn them into your religion, in our case, all this woke nonsense, then they would dearly love to put you in a deep, dark hole and torture you.
Yeah, I'm sure they would.
I do wonder what the hell happened to the fourth directorate.
Oh, it's probably there somewhere, but it's like, you've got 20 directorates. There's probably a directorate for honeypots. Because they weren't averse to using the odd attractive Russian girl.
There's enough of those.
To seduce, naive British politicians. Anyway, well, I mean, the ninth chief directorate was the protection for party leaders. The 8th and 16th directorates handled communications, security, and signals. See, there's hundreds of them. Hundreds of them.
Essentially just split out, and so the KGB was more, I think it was more like an umbrella for all of these different directorates, because each of the directorates had its own chief. And I mean, obviously, that's a good way to split things up, because you've got each of the 20 directorates has a chief, and then the KGB itself has a chief.
Yeah.
But there isn't one person who has all of the power.
Yeah, well, I suppose, yeah.
And they were probably all watching each other as well. I mean, just because they're tasked with monitoring foreign nationals or whatever doesn't mean to say they're not going to be monitoring their own people if they have to.
Oh, no, they spent most of the time monitoring their own people, mate. The KGB spent more time working inside Russia than it did outside. I mean, notable targets: Alexander Solzhenitsyn, Andrei Sakharov. You know, both writers who ended up in the gulags.
Yeah,
and that was
loads of them.
Yeah, there was loads of them.
I mean, we could probably do a list of all of them. Spend an hour just reading out the names of all the people or more. And I mean, Solzhenitsyn, people should, if people want an idea of what
a day in the life of
these communist assholes is like, read Solzhenitsyn.
A Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich should be minimum required reading. Minimum.
Mm-hmm.
But the whole Gulag archipelago is well worth a read.
They're
not
fantastic
big
books.
They're not big books either. You can rip through them quite quickly. Other books that you should read, and you know, I am preaching to you here slightly, because I think a lot of people these days are not well read enough. I don't know if you disagree with it. Well, you agree with me, obviously.
No, I don't disagree at all.
I don't think you're a lot of people are not well read enough. If you need to read things like, George Orwell's Animal Farm, even before you read 1984, Fahrenheit 451, TEH 1138
used to be required reading in schools.
Well, yeah, Animal Farm was required reading in schools as well. I made my daughter read Animal Farm, and she actually loved it. But it's when you read Animal Farm, it's presented in a humorous way, but it's actually telling you everything that actually went on in basically Russia during Stalin's regime. So I mean, these books need to be read, and I don't think some people have even heard of them. What's his name? Fahrenheit 451. Was that Ray Bradbury? No.
That was.
I
can't remember.
But anyway, I mean, you've got to be reading these books, people. They're just really, really worth it. I mean, I used to devour science fiction. Frank, what's his name? Herbert. The Dune saga is just brilliant. Forget the movies. The books are so much better. Just so much better. But read more, and listen to us.
Oh dear! Right, so
it was Ray Bradbury for a night for. I mean, my memory's still there. I still get most things right. Thank you.
Let's move on to the Cold War.
Mm-hmm.
So and also KGB leadership.
Yes,
that's kind of where we're going. So obviously there was a succession of KGB chairmen from 1954 to 1991, which reflected broader political developments within the Soviet Union. And shaped the organization's priorities and methods throughout the Cold War era. We had people. Well, I don't think we need to list out.
No, we don't. I think we should jump down to, in the international arena, the KGB gradually expanded. Down a bit the third paragraph.
Yeah, no, keep going.
No, well, okay. The KGB gradually expanded to become the world's largest foreign intelligence service, engaging in a global contest with Western intelligence agencies throughout the Cold War. KGB agents and officers operated under diplomatic, journalistic, and business cover in countries worldwide, collecting political, military, scientific, and technological intelligence that was crucial to Soviet strategic planning. Unlike its American counterpart, the CIA, the KGB conducted most of its activities domestically, focusing on Soviet citizens rather than exclusively on foreign targets. Nevertheless, its foreign intelligence operations achieved remarkable successes in penetrating Western governments. We will penetrate your governments.
Well, Kim Philby to start with.
Well, yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
well, the Cambridge 4 originally, and then the Cambridge 5 when we realised that there was a fifth man. But yeah, I mean, they had lots of success. There was Americans that spied for them as well. Aldrich Ames, I think, was one of them.
Yeah, I think the name rings a bell.
But one of the KGB's most significant contributions to Soviet power was the acquisition of scientific and technical information, which provided critical support for Soviet military and space programs. Through both human intelligence and technical means, the KGB repeatedly obtained advanced technology necessary for developing Soviet submarines, aircraft, missiles, and nuclear weapons, helping to maintain a strategic parity within the technologically superior Western adversaries. The KGB also excelled in counterintelligence operations, successfully identifying and neutralizing many Western intelligence operations within the Soviet bloc. According to declassified documents, the KGB aggressively recruited former German intelligence officers after World War II, using them to penetrate West German intelligence services. So they were essentially doing the same thing that we were after the war finished, because they didn't call it Operation Paperclip, but there was a whole bunch of scientists that ended up going over to the Soviet side.
Yeah.
And there was intelligence officers that went to the Russian side, and others that went to the American side. So, yeah, we just had all these ex-Nazis that were all infiltrating both the East and the West. It's just...
Yeah. And,
it's crazy.
I think a lot of people would have been up in arms had they known, what was running NASA, who were working for America in really secret and military capacities. I think people would have been taken aback.
Also, the CIA. I mean, Reinhard Gehlen and his whole intelligence network was essentially folded into the CIA. And I don't know. It's a case of when you spend too much time looking at evil, it looks back at you, or you bring it on board and try and tame it or something. I don't know. I think that particularly organizations like NASA and the CIA that absorbed a lot of these ex-Nazis, you have to wonder how much the organizations were influenced by those people.
Yeah.
And I'm not necessarily, because obviously you got Werner von Braun, who's the most famous one, but it's more the culture and the sort of attitudes that these people would have brought into Western intelligence and NASA and stuff like that. And it's just, when you have a lot of Ukrainian nationalists that ended up in Canada and subsequently get cheered in Parliament and stuff like that, that these are not good people.
Yeah.
And they were useful people because they knew stuff.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you look at Werner von Braun, I mean, he was quite happy to use slave labor when he was in Peenemünde building his V2s.
Yep, he was. He was indeed.
And I mean, they'll try and be all contrite about it afterwards and say, "Oh no, well, we tried to treat them nicely or whatever," but it's bullshit.
So moving on, we then come. I mean, it's a short history, as we said, towards the end of the KGB and its legacy. As Mikhail Gorbachev introduced these policies of glasnost, which means openness, and perestroika. That's a great word, perestroika. I love that. Restructuring. In the mid-1980s, tensions emerged between reformist leadership and conservative elements within the security apparatus. KGB chairman Vladimir Kryuchkov? Something like that.
Kryuchkov, I think.
I don't know. Became increasingly alarmed by what he perceived as Gorbachev's dangerous concessions to Western pressure and domestic liberalization. These concerns culminated in Kryukov's decision to join other hardliners in the 1991 coup attempt against Gorbachev, a desperate effort to reverse liberalization and preserve the Soviet system. Because let's face it, although most of the people in the Soviet system, what would you say, 99% of them are serfs. The ones that are in the positions of power, why would you want to give it up? And this is one of my main contention about how you'll never change a political system from within unless you've got someone that's going to drive it. But that someone that's going to drive it needs to be someone like a dictator, like Gorbachev. Because you would never have changed that system if it would never have changed naturally. It was Gorbachev that drove it.
And there's a lot of Gorbachev is very popular in the West. He always has been. I was a huge fan of him when I was a kid. I mean, all of this, the coup in 1991, I remember that, watching that on TV, and
he also took
away things and stuff.
But he took away the fear that you were going to be killed by a nuclear war at any minute, because things did start to relax when he came into power.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And, I don't know if you remember the 70s and 80s, but the fear of nuclear war was ever present.
Yeah, I mean, the 80s, I remember the 80s more than the 70s. But it was about halfway through the 80s because you had the whole thing about Andropov and Brezhnev, and then Gorbachev came along, and suddenly started using words like glasnost and perestroika. These are two words that are etched into my memory from back then. And it was like a weight being lifted off, because up until that point, there was a palpable fear of imminent nuclear catastrophe, largely thanks to the media and it all being pumped up in order to kind of keep the military-industrial complex happy. But there was a genuine fear, and people born after that time don't really know what it was like. And I guess that's why us oldies have been the ones kind of most worried about a return of this whole threat of nuclear Armageddon, because that was our childhood to a large extent.
Yeah, and the whole eroding of our natural rights just seems to be ridiculous. Freedom of speech and freedom to think. Freedom to pray silently. These things are ridiculous that these can even be considered to be under threat, and yet people are getting locked up for it. It's just crazy. This is like what I imagined living in the Soviet Union was like now in the UK. And that's freaking scary, and it's just soul destroying that the UK has come to this. It's disgusting.
I can really relate to that. And what really gets on my tits is the fact that you've got these gaslighting politicians trying to claim that we have freedom and democracy. And if you listen to mealy mouth Starmer talking about how proud he is of Britain's free speech traditions when he was in the White House, it makes me want to puke.
Yeah,
literally. And there seems to be this continuous rollback of freedom. It's like every new piece of legislation that the government seems to introduce always seems to have a component that involves us giving up some sort of freedom, whether it's big things like them being able to search whatever they want, whenever they want, or having our electronic communications just listened to continuously via their echelon systems and all that kind of stuff. I mean, to say that I don't know, it just feels like Britain in 2025 is a bit too much like the Soviet Union in 1955.
Yeah, I think it is. I think you're right. So the KGB, units of the KGB were mobilized to support the coup. And certain people did and did not take part in this attempt to overthrow the Soviet hierarchy at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So there were plans to arrest democratic activists and reassert centralized control. However, the plotters' indecision, combined with popular resistance led by Russian President Boris Yeltsin, and the refusal of key military units to support the takeover, resulted in the coup's collapse after just 3 days.
Which is, I don't know. I thought it was a good thing then, and I think it is a good thing
Yeah.
now. I don't think Yeltsin did Russia any favors, but he did. He did have Putin as his deputy, and Putin's basically turned the country around from what it was then, despite all of the Western media propaganda that you'll hear about Russia. I mean, most Western, I can't actually discuss Russia with most people because they're so blinded by 20 plus years of anti-Putin, anti-Russia propaganda that they literally have no freaking clue what Russia is like or what effect Putin has had on their society. So, yeah, but I mean, that was the KGB came to an end in 1991, and it's now, I think it was, I don't think the FSB.
Along with the Soviet Union.
Yeah, obviously. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it was kind of morphed into the FSB, but I'm not sure that the FSB necessarily does all of the same things that the KGB did, for example, because it seems to me like there's a lot less of the political repression and stuff like that in Russia. But I don't know. I mean, these spooks, they work in the shadows and they're always watching everything.
Yeah, of course they are. And I mean, that it applies here as well, because, you know, when you look at what they do internally here with the GCHQ, you know, they're monitoring our communications, and no doubt, I have no doubt that we are on some kind of, you know, minority watch list as potential dissidents or some nonsense like that. When really we just want to be able to say what the hell we like. I mean, we're not going out stirring up, you know, bands of people or whatever. But it's not right that we should.
Unless you count the troll room.
Oh yeah, okay, there is a troll room. You know, I mean, we don't see that our saving grace is we don't have a huge following, because if we had a huge following, I think we'd be attacked a lot more. You know.
Yeah, we'd have to be much more careful about what we said as well, which we still kind of do, but a little bit less so.
Although I did reply to Keir Starmer's one of Keir Starmer's tweets today, telling them to fuck off. You know.
Yeah, but if you go through, I mean, everything he posts, you just get this deluge of people telling him to fuck off and calling him a CUNT, and it's hilarious, and he gets, I mean, he gets ratioed really, really quickly as well.
Yeah, I don't know why he even bothers.
Exactly, he's just, and all he does is gaslight.
Yeah,
literally, he's broken every election promise he made, and he actually expects anyone to believe a bloody word he says. It's just ridiculous. So that was basically the KGB split up into FSB and SVR, and the SVR does domestic and the FSB does external, and then they have the FPS, which does the protection of government officials and facilities and stuff like that. And all of the Soviet republics, after the fall of the Soviet Union, they all established their own security services and sometimes maintained close ties with Russia and sometimes didn't. I think we know who's who.
Yeah.
But that was it. And I mean, the KGB legacy extends far beyond its formal dissolution, and it profoundly shaped Russia's post-Soviet development and the evolution of intelligence practices globally. That's the other thing to bear in mind, is that the KGB actually had a huge influence on the CIA and MI6, and because when they're all trying to infiltrate each other and spy on each other and things like that, they inevitably learn from each other in a strange way. So should we move on to Mr. Putin?
Yeah, okay. So let's talk about Mr. Putin. from Leningrad student to Soviet intelligence officer to eventually world leader. Yeah, let's talk about Mr. Putin. Vladimir Putin's career as a KGB officer represents a formative chapter in the Russian leader's life, shaping both his worldview and approach to governance. Long before becoming Russia's president, Putin spent 16 years in Soviet intelligence, working domestically and abroad during the Cold War. His background in the KGB has frequently been cited by analysts as key to understanding his leadership style, his strategic thinking, and his perception of international relations. While Putin's intelligence career officially ended with the collapse of the Soviet Union, the training, expertise, and networks he developed during the period provided a foundation for his rapid rise through Russia's post-Soviet political landscape.
Mm-hmm.
Indeed.
Well, we've already discussed his him applying for the KGB at 15, and how what struck him most was how one spy could decide the fate of thousands of people. And yeah, so he did end up after university. He began training at the 401st KGB school in Okhta, in Leningrad, which is now St. Petersburg, obviously, which was St. Petersburg before, and then Leningrad, and now it's St. Petersburg again.
Yeah,
I think it was actually Putin that renamed it St. Petersburg.
Because
That's where he was born as well. That's where he's from, and he had a during the siege of Leningrad during the Second World War. He actually lost a brother, and because his family were really impacted by the siege, and I think that was one of his formative moments. But his early His early KGB career primarily involved counterintelligence work. He initially served in the second chief directorate, responsible for counterintelligence, before being transferred to the first chief directorate, where he monitored foreigners and consular officials in Leningrad. This initial phase of his intelligence career provided practical experience in surveillance techniques, recruitment operations, and the identification of potential security threats, skills that would serve him well throughout his career, I bet. So, do you want to go on?
Yeah.
I just need to go off camera for really quickly.
Okay. So, in 1984, Putin received further specialized training at Moscow's Yuri Andropov Red Banner Institute, preparing him for foreign deployment. The following year, he began what would become a 5-year assignment in Dresden, East Germany, where he served from 1985 to 1990 using a cover identity as a translator. And, you know, Putin can speak a couple of languages, and he pretends not to on occasion, but he pretty much can speak, English and German, I think.
Yeah, I think he's probably, when he's in public, he probably does everything in Russian because he's the Russian president.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't be surprised if when he's in closed door negotiations, he probably switches to English.
Yeah. This period represented the most significant international experience of Putin's KGB career, placing him in a frontline Cold War position as tensions between the East and West continued. So while he was in Dresden, Putin operated one of the KGB's liaison officers to the East German Stasi. The Stasi, the secret police of East Germany. His responsibilities in this role have been subject to varying interpretations, with some sources suggesting relatively mundane duties, while others indicate more significant operational involvement. According to the official career history, Putin was recognized for his service by the East German communist regime, which awarded him a bronze medal for faithful service to the National People's Army.
And the Stasi is one we're going to have to cover because they are.
Oh, yeah.
They're even more terrifying than the KGB. So, some accounts, including that of Russian-American author Masha Gessen, have downplayed Putin's operational significance during this period, suggesting that he and his colleagues were reduced mainly to collecting press clippings, thus contributing to the mountains of useless information produced by the KGB. However, journalist Catherine Belton has argued that this portrayal may have been cover for more sensitive activities, potentially including coordination with the terrorist Red Army faction. A 2023 investigation by Der Spiegel questioned these claims about RAF involvement, RAF as in Red Army faction, noting that an anonymous source making these allegations had never been an RAF member and is considered a notorious fabulist, i.e. a lying bastard. So Putin's Dresden assignment ended as the communist East Germany. That's interesting. So Putin was in, because I visited Dresden on a school trip not long before. It was about 6 months before the wall came down.
Oh.
We had a school trip to Dresden and Prague.
Is that when you were recruited?
Yeah, man. Yeah, I have to say all of those claims about me being a Russian agent and a Putin apologist and a Kremlin stooge are all absolutely correct. I've been working for them since the 90s. Cunningly disguised as a totally unimportant IT person.
Well, hey, but yeah, all the best spies have the best covers, don't they?
Oh, that's true. But I mean, Dresden, it's one of the most grim places I've ever been to in my life. We had I don't know, it took us about 4 or 5 hours or something to get across the border. Multiple checks, getting in and out of the bus, and there's grumpy East German soldiers and grumpy West German soldiers and all this stuff. And we got to just where the border was. I don't think that was Dresden. And it was raining, and we all trooped off the bus to stretch our legs, and everyone got soaked. And when we got back on, we just stank of sulfur, like the pollution from the rain.
Lovely.
But it's interesting because I remember being in Dresden and seeing the candle wax all over the statues in the center of the city from all of the pro-democracy protests. So yeah, I was in Dresden at the same time as Putin. I quite like that. So anyway, during the fall of the Berlin Wall in November 1989, Putin reportedly took action to secure sensitive files, burning KGB documents to prevent demonstrators from obtaining them. Shortly afterward, he returned to Leningrad in early 1990, now serving as a member of the KGB's active reserve. Back in Leningrad, Putin spent approximately 3 months working with the International Affairs section of Leningrad State University. Even in this academic position, he maintained his intelligence role, reporting to Vice Rector Yuri Molchanov, while identifying potential KGB recruits and monitoring the student body. During this period, he also renewed his connection with former Professor Anatoly Sobchak, who was becoming a significant political figure as the first democratically elected mayor of what was now being called St. Petersburg. Right, so it wasn't Putin that called it St. Petersburg. Putin has consistently maintained that he resigned from the KGB with the rank of lieutenant colonel on August the 20th, 1991, during the failed coup attempt against Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev. He later explained his decision by stating, "As soon as the coup began, I immediately decided which side I was on." Though he acknowledged the choice was difficult, as he had spent the best part of his life with the organs, which is the organs of state security, they were called.
Yeah.
In the 2017 interview with filmmaker Oliver Stone, Putin reiterated that he'd resigned because he disagreed with the coup and did not want to be part of intelligence in the new administration. And that was for Oliver Stone's film Ukraine on Fire, which everyone should watch.
Oh yeah, definitely. And in fact, it was it triggered me to make that video about how the Ukraine war started and all that, and who was behind it. And it's funny because I was watching Judge Knapp today, Judge Napolitano, and every one of his guests, you know how he always asks his guests the same questions. He does about 4 a day, but he just gives them the same questions, so he has less work to do, and you get the different answers from each of his different guests, which is quite smart. I've got to give him credit there. But so he was asking them their questions, and all of them said, "Well, actually, Judge, it was the US that started the Ukrainian war."
Did you see his him and Larry Johnson interviewing Lavrov?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
That's good. No, I like Judge Knapp. The only thing about Judge Knapp that grates me a bit is if you watch all of them, you have to watch the same sort of little interview clips. So I don't.
Well, that's
want
what I
to
just
watch
said.
Keir Starmer 5
Yeah,
times.
aye, but that's what I said. He does that to make it easy for him because he has all these different guests, but he just has to say the spiel. Well, he says the spiel the same way each time, so he doesn't have to think too much. Anyway, I mean,
that's give him a little bit more credit than that, John.
Yeah, but it's quite. I did give him credit. I said it's quite smart because it cuts down his workload, right? And he only needs to think of his questions once because he's asking the same questions. Each of it, he doesn't tailor the questions to each of the guests. He just reads the script. I mean, you think about it. You go back and watch, and you watch on one day. Every guest gets the same questions, exactly the same questions. So
I hadn't even noticed.
Oh, boy, I'm a trained observer. Remember, I had I managed to ditch well, we I don't know how to say this. I had a liaison with some East.
Does your wife know about this?
No, I wasn't married. I wasn't married. This was back in the 80s. I was at summer school and for the Open Uni, and there were East German girls there. And me and one of the guys I got in tow with took two of them away for the evening round the Trossachs. Right, we took them for a drive round the Trossachs, and we had to ditch their handlers because they had East German fucking dodgy looking handlers.
That'd be the Stasi that we were talking about a minute ago.
It would be. And me being fucking young and horny, you thought that's just another challenge, isn't it? You know. So we ditched the handlers and took off in my Opel Manta right round the Trossachs. That was cool.
So you mean it caused an international incident, and those poor girls probably were never trusted again by the handlers?
I know. I really feel
you probably ruined their lives. You know that.
I feel quite bad about that. Actually, thinking about it, they probably were not treated well.
Well, they probably were not allowed,
especially if they found out I was a cop.
Oh dear!
Maybe it was a setup. Maybe they were honeypotting me and trying to get information, but nothing ever came from it. You know.
Maybe the handlers let you escape.
Could be. Oh.
So where are we?
We are. Putin's intelligence background significantly influenced his selection as Yeltsin's. Oh no! Hold on.
Yeah, no, that's
that's right. Significantly influenced his selection as Yeltsin's successor, Valentin Yushimov. One of Yeltsin's most trusted aides, played a key role in Putin's rise, giving him his first Kremlin position in 1997. See, you always need an insider. When you're in these kind of games, you need someone. When I was in the police, we used to say, "Who's your wire?" Because there was always somebody higher up that would pull for you if you were going places.
Mm-hmm.
And it's quite funny when I think back about it. It's true. Everybody that was going places always had someone higher up that was, putting them forward. But anyway, where was I? Where was it? Putin won the subsequent election in 2000, beginning what would become one of the longest leadership tenures in modern Russian history. Throughout his presidency, elements of his KGB training, particularly his calculated approach to risk, strategic thinking, and emphasis on security, have remained evident in his governance style. There you go.
Well, and I think also the reason that Russia's done so well.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at the economic growth and the way that they've been able to just not not sort of bat off the sanctions, but they've managed to survive and thrive whilst being the most sanctioned country ever in the history of ever. Was it 18,000 sanctions or something? And
Rubio actually went against Trump today, didn't he? When he turned around and said, "Look, let's fight," because they said, "What are you going to do? What are you going to do if Russia doesn't agree to the ceasefire? Are you going to, put more sanctions on them?" And Rubio's like, "Well, let's face it, they're pretty much all sanctioned out. They've got, we can't really sanction them anymore. We don't have anything left to sanction."
Well, they do have a few things left to sanction, but what they've got left
things
to
that'll
sanction
hurt
will
them.
end up hurting themselves. Yeah.
Well, of course it will.
And I mean, I did see before we came on that Trump had signed something. Well, it's unconfirmed that Trump has signed something shutting down the Russian banks that the Europeans were using to buy oil surreptitiously.
I've got a theory about this, and I think Hatchie might be on the same track. But we'll discuss that tomorrow night in All In. But yeah, so Vladimir Putin's 16-year career in the KGB represents a crucial foundation for understanding his path to power and his approach to leadership. From his initial recruitment in 1975 to his resignation as lieutenant colonel in 1991, Putin's intelligence career provided him with skills, connections, and perspectives that would prove valuable in his political ascent. While his specific operational roles and achievements during his KGB service remain subject to some debate and mythologizing, the impact of this formative period on his worldview and leadership approach is undeniable. The former KGB officer from Leningrad ultimately transformed himself into one of the world's most influential and enduring political leaders, with his intelligence background remaining an integral part of his personal narrative and public persona. Indeed.
Yeah, I mean, he's a fascinating character.
Oh, yeah, he is.
I mean, he's definitely no angel.
Who is?
But exactly. And for someone, I mean, he clearly cares about his country. That's undeniable. And frankly, I wish more countries had leaders like him. Not necessarily exactly like him, but people who were thinking more about what's good for the country as opposed to what's good for them personally or their political party.
Yeah,
which is what we have too much of in the West. And as soon as a political figure in the West, let's look at Romania, that Kalin Georgescu, who is, they call him far right, but everyone that the left doesn't like is far right. But he cares about his country, and the European Union is doing absolutely everything they possibly can, including all sorts of nefarious, anti-democratic, or authoritarian nonsense to stop this guy from being president, despite him being the clear choice of a majority of Romanians.
He's been banned from running now, hasn't he?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I mean, really, the European Union has become the interferer that the USA used to be.
Well, to me, the EU is it's looking more and more like the USSR every day.
Yeah.
And I mean, we're not there yet, but when you look at, it's people like Ursula is never elected the EU Commission president is not elected. They're appointed
none of the
by...
commissioners are. They're all appointed.
Exactly. And they have the...
they say, what your lefty will say is, they're elected by their countries. No, they're not.
No,
they're not. They're appointed by the countries. They're appointed by the people you elected to represent you in the countries. But that's not the same as being elected by the population.
Exactly. And if you look at how little most European electorates think of their dear leaders, those assholes don't have a mandate anyway.
Yeah.
They say they've got a mandate because they happen to have won an election, but you try winning an election in Europe that the EU doesn't want you to win. Just try it.
Yeah.
It won't happen. Whether it's the Netherlands or France or Germany.
Look at Le Pen. I mean, the popular vote would have swung her well past, any chance of being caught by Macron or whatever. But the way they manage things and work around things, they actively undermine democracy.
But it was done deliberately. The French system is set up. It was set up like that in the 1950s, deliberately to prevent, to remove any possibility that the French Communist Party would ever get into power. And so they have this convoluted system that essentially allows them to undermine the will of the people and create this artificial majority where they stick a whole load of smaller parties together.
Yeah.
And they create a grouping that's bigger than the party that they're trying to keep out of power. And the whole thing is convoluted and ridiculous. And so to point fingers at somewhere like Russia and say that that Putin wasn't elected democratically or whatever, it's nonsense. I mean, he's arguably more popular than any European leader.
Yeah.
And he certainly doesn't have negative popularity like Starmer. But that's basically Putin and the KGB. Not so much traditional rabbit hole fare, because we haven't. I mean, I don't know if we've got much on some of the more wacky secret operations or the counterintelligence stuff. I mean, there's probably masses and masses of it, because there is some proper James Bond stuff in there. I mean, some of the gadgets and some of the techniques and the sort of spying on each other in places like Istanbul and these cities during the Cold War where East and West would still kind of mix a bit.
Okay. Well, shall we run through a few?
Yeah, we've got some.
Okay, I've just pulled some up. Operation Pandora, a lovely name, Pandora. Manufacturing a US race war. In the 1960s, the KGB exploited America's civil rights turmoil by forging inflammatory pamphlets disguised as Jewish Defense League materials. These fake flyers accused black Americans of attacking Jews and looting shops, urged readers to fight back mongrels, simultaneously sent letters to black militant groups claiming the JDL was targeting them, and their goal was to spark race riots to destabilise the US. They even planned to bomb a black college and blame it on the JDL. While full-scale war didn't erupt, the operation revealed the KGB's willingness to weaponise social fractures. Now, I think, if anything, the West has taken that and ran with it. Yeah?
Yeah. Yeah, that's that's kind of picking up where they left off, sort of thing.
Give me a second while I zip something.
We've got,
give me a second here while I zip something across to you.
Well, I've found one, Operation Toucan.
Toucan?
Yeah, 1976, the KGB teamed up with Cuban intelligence to smear Chilean dictator Augusto Pinochet. They forged documents linking him to a brutal assassination plot and fed disinformation to the New York Times, resulting in 66 articles on Chile's human rights abuses that year, far outpacing coverage of similar issues in Cuba or Cambodia.
Oh. Hostage dismemberment diplomacy, 1985. 1985, that's not that long ago. Well, in my terms. When Hezbollah kidnapped Soviet diplomats in Lebanon, the KGB responded with grotesque psychological warfare. They kidnapped a relative of a Hezbollah leader. They castrated and dismembered him, mailing the body parts to the terrorists.
And I bet Hezbollah didn't mess with any more Russians.
They threatened to repeat the act on other relatives unless hostages were freed. The remaining diplomats were released within days, a brutal demonstration of the KGB's no negotiation. Holy shit, man! That is tremendous. Why do we not do these things?
Well, it's brutal, but
Effective.
Well, especially when you're dealing with people who would quite happily do similar things to you,
Good
then
grief.
there is an argument. But the thing is that if you only have to do something like that once, and then their nonsense stops.
Yeah.
As distasteful as it is. Okay, let's get something that's a little bit less extreme. The Great Seal Bug, 1945 to 1952. The KGB gifted a carved wooden US seal to the American ambassador in Moscow, hiding a revolutionary listening device inside. It spied on the embassy for 7 years before being discovered, showcasing their technical ingenuity. So, yeah, they were listening to everything that the American ambassador in Moscow was saying for 7 years.
So, Department 5, the Assassination Squad, the KGB's 13th department, specialized in James Bond-style elimination. They used illegal spies with deep cover identities, i.e. dead doubles, using corpses' IDs. They were trained in poisons, explosives, and sabotage, and they orchestrated Leon Trotsky's ice pick murder in Mexico in 1940.
And there was also the Poison Umbrella assassination in 1978, where the KGB killed Bulgarian dissident Georgy Markov in London by jabbing him with a ricin-tipped umbrella.
Georgy Markov, yeah.
Gorgy.
That's that.
The tiny pellet caused a mysterious death that baffled investigators until a defector revealed the truth.
And then there was that Litvinenko guy. Did we not speak about him the other night? You know, the one that got poisoned with polonium.
Yeah, that was the cup of tea, though.
Yeah.
Was it me that we were talking about? Did we talk about that?
I remember talking about it. I remember talking about it. Maybe it was just me. Anyway.
No. Well, you might. I don't know. I don't remember that one, but my memory is faulty. Okay. So,
media manipulation in India. The Mitrokin archive revealed that the KGB bribed 10 plus Indian newspapers to publish pro-Soviet articles, planted 5,510 fabricated stories in 1975 alone. Right now, you got to wonder, because you look at some of the news that comes out of India and you think, is that real? And I think they might still be planting stories there. And delivered suitcases of cash to the Prime Minister, Indira Gandhi, whose codename was Vano. This created a massive propaganda network that shaped Indian politics for decades, and some say still does.
Right, then we've got the IRA arms deal, 1972.
Yeah.
The KGB provided 100 machine guns, rifles, and pistols to the Irish Republican Army, hoping to fuel chaos in the UK. The Marxist-leaning IRA's violence during the Troubles aligned with Soviet interests. So,
in the 1970s, the KGB tried to buy 3 Northern Californian banks, the Peninsula National, the First National of Fresno, and Tejo National, through a Singaporean frontman. Why? To access loans and clients in Silicon Valley's tech sector. And they wanted to steal secrets about Tomahawk missiles and stealth tech. The CIA blocked the purchases, but the plot showed the KGB's creative industrial espionage tactics.
They were good at that.
They are.
There was the farewell dossier sabotage in the 1980s. Working off of French spies in intel, the KGB unknowingly received doctored tech from the US, leading to a massive gas pipeline explosion in Siberia in 1982. It was a reverse sting that turned Soviet espionage against itself. I was going to say Operation Monopoly, 1960s. The KGB dug a tunnel under Berlin to tap US and British communication lines.
Yeah.
It listened in for nearly a year before the CIA, tipped off by a double agent, shut it down. But not before the Soviets gathered a haul of intel.
We spoke about this as well, because it was like 1,500 kilometres under Berlin, or 1,500 metres into Berlin.
Yeah, I remember talking about that one.
Yeah, it was quite the Soviets are quite good at tunnelling. But that might come up tomorrow as well.
No doubt. we've already talked about Cambridge 5.
Operation Ryan, nuclear attack paranoia. Convinced that the US would launch a surprise nuclear strike in the 1980s, the KGB launched history's most paranoid surveillance operation. They had 24/7 satellite monitoring of all US military bases. Now, that's a big task because there's something like 666 US military bases spread throughout 187 different countries. And they tracked radar usage and NATO communications. And they also instructed their spies to report suspicious activities like increased blood bank supplies. This would be a presumed sign of war preparations. The project wasted millions before being abandoned in 1984, a testament to Cold War delusions. The Cold War was like that, though. I mean, really, the Cold War was freaking mad. And yet people did still get on with your life, you know?
Well, that's the thing, and it wasn't. Yes, everyone had this kind of fear in the back of their heads that this might happen, but nobody let it stop you living your lives.
We had a thing. We had a thing in the police station that would go boop every minute or something like that, and it would sit in the charge bar or the back bar, and it would just go boop, right, and it was basically a box on the wall with a telephone system and a red light and a speaker, and it would just every minute would go boop, right, and it was a hardwired line to somewhere, right, that would warn you of impending nuclear strike, and you would have 3 minutes notice. Now, I've no fucking idea what we were meant to do with that 3 minutes notice because he never actually told us. But this thing was there, and there was a phone on it as well. Because if the alarm rang, you were to pick up the phone and follow the instructions on the other side. Those instructions, I suspect, may be: would you bend over and kiss your ass goodbye?
Which is pretty much the only thing you've got time to do in 3 minutes.
Yeah.
That's a bit cruel. So yeah, we'll give you a warning, but you only have 3 minutes.
I know.
Oh dear. What else we got? Operation Pandora in the 1960s. The KGB sought to ignite a race war in the US by stoking tensions between
I've done that one.
KKK.
You've
done that one already?
I did that one. Yeah.
I've done that one already.
I think we've done everything on that page that I sent you, apart from number 4, if you want to do that one.
Where's that one? You didn't send me a page.
Oh, right, okay. I thought I had, but never mind. So
I found some from Grok.
Right.
We've got Operation Infection. Is that one on your list?
No, I don't think. No, carry on.
That's it. Stalin allegedly ordered the KGB to assassinate actor John Wayne for his anti-communist stance.
Hold on.
2 agents sent to Hollywood reportedly defected to the FBI instead, and Wayne beefed up his home security.
Oh, for God's sake. The Trust operation, now this wasn't the KGB, this was the OGPU, which was a precursor to the KGB. They created
OGPU.
OGPU. They created a fake anti-Bolshevik resistance group called the Trust. And they tricked White Army exiles into returning to the USSR, where they executed them upon arrival. That's just horrible, isn't it? That's just horrible.
It really is.
But that's the Russian need for revenge, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. We got Operation Neptune in 1964, which is when the KGB sank crates of fake Nazi documents in the Czechoslovakian lake, and then discovered them to discredit West German politicians by tying them to Hitler's regime. A bit like Ursula. Divers and forged papers made it a theatrical success. So I think we've done that one.
Yeah, I think we've done it. Yeah, the KGB are forced to be reckoned with. Alas, no. Well, yeah, I think alas, no more is maybe stretching it a bit, but I think
I think the stuff that they learned.
Yeah.
I mean, even though they were split off into the SVR and the FSB and all this, I think that the institutional memory and the techniques and all of that stuff, I reckon that's still alive and kicking. Maybe not the brutality and the extreme nature of what they do, but certainly the ability to compromise countries, organizations, people, etc. I mean, everybody does this stuff. It's not just the Russians. We're doing it. The Americans are doing it. Even the New Zealanders do it. But do they have New Zealand spies?
Don't know. Maybe we should look.
I mean, they're part of the Five Eyes, so they do have some sort of intelligence network. But
yeah. I can't get over New Zealand after that awful demonstration of them doing the hacker in Parliament. I just thought, my God, and we brought this up before because remember the Aborigines. Well, they're not Aborigines, are they? What are they? What are they? New Zealanders?
Maori.
The Maori aren't even indigenous to New Zealand. Remember, they invaded New Zealand and ate the indigenous population because the Maori were cannibals. Just unbelievable.
Right. Should we call it a night?
I think we should, mate. I think we should because I think tomorrow's going to be a slog.
Yeah, no, tomorrow's going to easily be probably bordering on 2 hours. Wouldn't surprise me. And it also depends on what happens in the next 24 hours as well.
Yeah. So if you've enjoyed this, come back tomorrow night, same time, same place, where we will be going all in on the news of the week. And bloody hell, there's been some amount of news. Some of it will be funny, some of it will be sad, and some of it will just be completely unbelievable. But join us on Ed. You know you want to. Oh, it's been great. For you.